There are police patrols in the streets and military groups that ask for your cell phone to see if you support the United States, and if you do, they arrest you. There are hundreds of political prisoners. There are torture centers. I mean, these people are sick.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining us. Can you just explain your background as a Venezuelan? When did you leave Venezuela? Where do you live? What's your story?
Yes, I left Venezuela in 2016 to come to the United States. I lived in several places in the US, but now I'm a fellow at the Manhattan Institute. I'm an economist. I advocate for the freedom of Venezuela and really against socialist policies worldwide.
What was your reaction when you heard that Nicolás Maduro had been captured by American forces?
I was so thrilled. I mean, the fact that this thing that me and millions of others have been dreaming for so many years, and it happened, it really was unbelievable. At first, the morning I woke up on Saturday, and now, surreality is setting in, and I'm more hopeful than ever for the future of Venezuela.
What do you think will happen next? Do you think that the vice president will step up? Who do you think will lead Venezuela moving forward?
I think that the Trump administration is trying to organize a transition where they're forcing the people in power to gradually turn over the country to democratically elected authorities, such that it is orderly and not chaotic, which is obviously always a risk if you were to do this, just kill all the leadership, right? Which is also logistically harder than capturing one. And so I think that that's what they're doing. I think that after they captured Maduro, they proved that they were not bluffing with military action, which is what the Maduro regime thought until this weekend. Now they know that their lives are at risk and they must comply, and I'm hopeful they will.
Can you just remind us of what President Maduro was like as president of Venezuela for ordinary citizens?
Yeah, well, it's important to know it's not just Maduro as president. His entire regime is the same. Venezuela, after Chavez died, stopped being a one-man dictatorship and became more of an oligarchy. And so Delcy, who is the vice president, and Jorge, her brother, and Diosdado Cabello and Vladimir, all of them are, I would say, equally powerful to each other and to Maduro. And what Venezuela was like and is like is economically destroyed. We went from being one of the richest countries in the world to being one of the poorest within my lifetime. And that happened. What do I mean by that? I mean blackouts very often, lack of water. It means very high crime. Caracas became one of the most dangerous cities in the world. And then now it's increasing repression. There are police patrols in the streets and military groups that ask for your cell phone to see if you support the United States, and if you do, they arrest you. There are hundreds of political prisoners. There are torture centers. I mean, these people are sick, right? And the Venezuelan population, 90% of us dislike them and want them out.
What was it like for you and your family? Why did you leave Venezuela in 2016?
Well, it was a story of gradual decline. We owned a gas station. That was my parents did for a living. And we were making a good living in the early 2000s. And then by 2016, we were just making $100 a month. And things were not good. So I was a kid, right? I left at 17. I finished high school in Venezuela. And so I just prepared since I was even younger to try to excel academically and get sponsored with a scholarship to leave the country. And that's how I left. Then my parents left too because they were afraid that I wasn't going to be able to go back to Venezuela, in part because I became much more politically active, right? It was true. Now, if I went back to Venezuela, I would be arrested. I'm on a list because of my advocacy in shows like yours.
A lot of people blame the economic problems in Venezuela not on Maduro or Chavez, but on the American oil sanctions. How do you respond to that?
I think that anybody who blames what happened to Venezuela on sanctions is either ignorant or complicit with the Venezuelan socialist regime. Maduro and Chavez before him are who destroyed our country. They destroyed it by taking people's businesses. That was not the United States taking our businesses. In fact, the United States was a victim because American businesses were taken over too. So it was them who destroyed us. And with regards to the sanctions don't affect the people. The sanctions are against the government. You can buy things from Venezuelan citizens. You can hire Venezuelan citizens. You can travel to Venezuela. I don't recommend it because the Maduro regime will take you. But there's no U.S. restrictions on going. It's not like Iran. It's not like North Korea. This is very different. And so it is a fake excuse. The sanctions exist to take the assets of Maduro regime cronies. Switzerland just found out that turns out Maduro had millions of dollars on his name in Switzerland. Is taking Maduro's money a sanction on Venezuela? No, I would argue it is doing justice for Venezuelans.
President Trump, following the operation against Maduro, was pretty explicit in saying that America wants to rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure in order to sell Venezuelan oil to profit American companies. Now, as a Venezuelan, I presume that this was slightly shocking.
No. Why? I think it's good that the United States wants to rebuild Venezuelan oil infrastructure. Isn't that to the benefit of Venezuelans? I think so. Venezuelans want to privatize the oil sector. The opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, her plan is to privatize the oil sector. And she won the primary. Her candidate won the election overwhelmingly. And so that is the plan. We don't want more socialism. We want foreign investment, not just of the Americans, but, maybe the Mexicans and the Canadians and the Europeans, but certainly not the Chinese or the Russians anymore. And so that is what Venezuela needs to prosper. We need to lean in on the oil sector.
But what about the idea of taking Venezuelan oil for America? That was the kind of implication from President Trump.
What do you mean by taking? If you mean by taking, that what they're doing, which is the sanctioned oil vessels of the Iranian, Russian, Chinese, and Venezuelan dark fleet are being seized and the oil is taken to the United States, I think that's good, right? These are criminal organizations. But once Venezuela is a free country, Venezuela is going to sell its oil to the United States and other countries like it's always been.
After President Maduro was captured, what is the situation like on the ground in Venezuela? What's going on now?
Yes. Well, I think it's important to note Maduro is not the president and was never the president. He is a dictator. He was not elected. Neither is Delcy, the vice president. They're all thugs who rule a country, kind of like the Taliban rules Afghanistan. And they're not a legitimate government. They're just a terrorist organization with a lot of land. And so what happens now is because they are so scared of the Maduro regime, the repression inside the country to anybody who potentially supports what the United States did has ramped up. There are police checkpoints to see your social media activity and text messages to see if you supported the capture of Maduro. There are, people checking social media overall and seeing if Venezuelans are doing it. There's a block of X and other social media things, so you need a VPN. Maduro did that before he was captured. So they had been ramping up for some time. And people are very scared inside Venezuela. The streets are very empty. They're very hopeful because, this was a historic thing. A lot of people never believed it would end up happening, but they really want a transition to happen as soon as possible.
We saw a lot of liberals in America and around the world protesting the capture of Maduro. People saying, this is against international law, this is a sovereign country, you can't just remove the president. What do you make of that reaction versus the reaction of some Venezuelans who've maybe celebrated this toppling of Maduro?
Yeah, well, there's, number one, I think people need to do some reality check. If you believe that Maduro is a good guy, then it sounds like you need to talk to a Venezuelan. Just go to the nearest Venezuelan. I don't think there's a Google Maps for that, but ask around and see what they think. And then on the philosophical point, where does sovereignty come from? It comes from popular support, from popular will, right? And who has the popular support in Venezuela? Who gave legitimacy to the current regime in Venezuela? Nobody. The Venezuelan people want them out. We voted them out. And the United States is actually helping Venezuela regain its sovereignty from a terrorist regime that rules it and from the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, and the Cubans. That is what the United States is doing.
So you mentioned the opposition leader her candidate won the presidential election with overwhelming support. But President Trump has said that she, the opposition leader, doesn't command the respect of the people of Venezuela, and it sounds like he doesn't want to support her. Where do you stand on this line?
I think, look, I mean, objectively, she's the only person who would win an election in Venezuela. So nobody can say otherwise. On the issue of respect, I mean, I think it's true that you need to have command of the guns and the military power in Venezuela to rule, especially during this transition period. So I think that what President Trump means, and especially, you can hear what Secretary Rubio clarified, who, by the way, has known Venezuela's opposition leader for 2 decades, and been a big admirer. What the plan I believe is to guarantee this transition under the remnants of the Maduro regime as long as they comply, so that we can hold a new election and then turn over authority gradually to those authorities, but within the Trump presidential term. Because if we wait more than Trump's presidential term, the Maduro regime is just not going to comply, because they know only President Trump has the guts to do a military intervention like he did this weekend in Venezuela.
Do you expect that to happen? Do you expect there will be free and fair elections in the next few years? Because surely it's in the interests of the people who currently are in the Maduro regime, not Maduro himself, obviously he's been captured, to just carry on the situation as it is.
Yes, I think the people in the regime inside, they have an incentive to try to delay and delay. So I would say, look, before the military intervention happened this weekend, I gave it a 5% chance of Venezuela regaining its freedom in the next few years. Now I give it an over 50% chance. I still think there's a substantial chance, who knows, maybe 40-something percent, that the regime will carry on. But now I think we do have more than a coin flip of Venezuela becoming a free country in the next year or 2 years max. And I find that really good and hopeful.
And if that does happen, will you move back to Venezuela? And do you expect a lot of Venezuelans abroad in the United States to come back?
That's an interesting question, because we do have some literature and evidence on return migration after a crisis ends. I think one interesting case in Europe is that of the Yugoslavian wars in the 90s. So I think it was approximately 1 million or 2 people from the former Yugoslavia went to Germany under temporary legal permits. And by the end, when the war ended, among the people who had left in the last 5 years, approximately half, a little less than half, went back to the former Yugoslavia. So when you translate that into the Venezuelan context, how many people have left in the last 5 years from Venezuela to other countries? Maybe 4 million people out of the 9, or maybe 5. So maybe we can see 2.5, 3 million Venezuelans go back to Venezuela. I will certainly, as soon as Venezuela is free, I will travel to visit and see what's happening and see old people, see friends. I've been in the U.S. 10 years, so I'm way more established. So, I'm not sure whether I would move back permanently, but I'm open to that possibility where an opportunity for me to arise.
Let's go back to the point about international law. So, like I mentioned, there have been lots of people protesting Maduro's capture because it violates so-called international law. Some presidents and prime ministers in European countries have made this criticism of President Trump. This violates international law. The Trump administration have been talking about potentially seizing Greenland from Denmark. And there are people who say, well, look, this is only just emboldening China and Russia to invade whoever they like, Taiwan and so on, because there are no rules anymore. You can just take a country's leader and that's it.
Stephen, China and Russia never followed any rules to begin with. I think this is just about the United States leveling the playing field and telling Russia, China, telling Iran that now we are playing this game too, and you should be scared of us. And so what Trump is doing is actually a deterrent to further imperialism of China and Russia. And so I support what the president is doing. I think it's wonderful. I think all the people complaining about international law, first, don't understand that these supposed laws don't apply in the United States. Only the U.S. Constitution does. And 2, the Maduro regime wasn't following any law. They weren't following human rights. The United States is restoring what's good. There is such a thing as good versus evil. China invading Taiwan is bad because China, the Communist Party, is evil and Taiwan is good. The United States capturing Maduro is good because the United States is good and Maduro is evil. It's not about this moral relativism of rules that some international body imposed. It's about what's good versus what's bad.
And finally, what is your prediction for Venezuela by the end of 2026?
I think I can guarantee this will happen. And I wouldn't have made this prediction last week. But now I do believe that we will have released the political prisoners for sure in Venezuela. That's hundreds of people. I know people who are there being tortured, being, violated in many ways. And I do think that we will have probably several institutions, if not already announced or held free elections in Venezuela to become once again a free country. I think there's an over 50% chance of that happening.
Okay, Daniel, on that positive note, thank you so much.
Thank you.